When I talk about my show, I often say I'm on a plane, train, and automobile. Well, guess what? Today I have been on 2 planes and I'm in an automobile for the next couple hours, so I'm just missing the train. Maybe I'll do it tomorrow. So I really do actually do exactly what I'm talking about. All right, back to the road. This is My Big Story, and I'm Christopher Swan. Okay, we're officially recording now.
So this is the part where I get nervous and stop talking, right?
Yeah, right? This is where I'm like, oh, crap, now it's on. You know what we could start with? Why don't you set the scene of actually where we're sitting?
Okay. All right. So it is...
This is Kevan Chandler and I sitting outside in a private patio at J.K. O'Donnell's in Fort Wayne, Indiana. We're here because it's one of Kevan's regular spots, just like Fortezza Coffee that we spent the morning at getting to know each other. In fact, both of these places, everyone knew Kevan. Seriously, practically everyone said hi as I walked by. So Kevan, spelled Kevan, that'll be important later, founded the nonprofit We Carry Kevan, where he's become a prominent voice for rethinking accessibility in the world. Meaning he's creating new ideas and resources to make the world more physically accessible to everyone. And all of it started after an unusual backpacking trip to Europe. So the sounds you hear are all real, including drops of rain on our head.
Yep.
So this is the first podcast I've done while we're sitting in the rain.
This is great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just thought that we should set that scene.
I think that's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of gray. I kind of feel like we're in England.
Yes.
Because it's gray and rainy and we're at a pub.
Outside. And here's the thing. As it's starting to... So this rain came and went a few times. And yes, we really did get fairly wet. But we just wrote it out. And I talked to Kevan more to hear about his experiences with his backpacking trip to Europe and how they were able to work around his wheelchair. All right, so you had this big trip in 2016, and you're backpacking with these 6 friends, but it wasn't just a backpacking trip. It was so much more, especially how you were going to do it and what it meant. Can you tell me a little bit more about what this trip was and what made it different?
Sure. So from kind of the basic logistics standpoint, just to give a little bit of background, we had decided about a year before that a couple of friends and I decided we wanted to go to Europe. And there were some things that we wanted to see, namely in France, England, and Ireland, that we knew were not going to be wheelchair friendly. And so we started the planning process by saying, well, we'll take the wheelchair, but we need a backpack for when we get to those parts of the trip. And because we had done that before, just maybe not to that extent, but I would go to friends' houses for a potluck, and they live on the 3rd floor. And so we'd leave my chair downstairs and carry me up. And so we kind of had this understanding that, well, if we want to do something, we're going to do it, whether it's wheelchair friendly or not. And so we realized, well, if we're going to be hiking around, which was our plan, we would need their arms free. So we came up with this backpack idea and started developing that. And
can you talk a little bit more about that? Like,
sure.
For the people that don't know, what does that mean, this backpack?
Yeah, so we found a backpack from a company called Deuter, and they have this kind of a toddler carrier. And so it's supposed to hold, I think, 48 pounds, and it's typically for kids and their parents going hiking. But we really liked the design, and we thought it was something that we could build on for me, and we knew we'd have to redo some things like the seat and develop some more support systems like in the neck and the arms and stuff. But we figured it was a good place to start. So we got one of those, and we're in touch with the company and said, hey, this is what we want to do. We're going to break the weight limit. We're going to try and do some other things, and got their feedback on it, and essentially modified it to fit me and kind of redid the whole backpack. And so that's where that came from. And it took about 4 months for the first time after the trip, kind of to jump ahead, we've worked with other people and developing them for them, developing backpacks for them. And that can take like a week or two. Now that we have the experience, we can work faster and we know what to look for and don't have to try the things that don't work. So, but yeah, so we developed this backpack. And as we did that, we were also figuring out exactly what we wanted to do on the trip. And just further along in the planning, we realized, the wheelchair is kind of going to get in the way. Like, we're going to spend all this time storing it and going to get it and finding places for it to stay while we're not using it. We found, I think the tipping point was we were looking for an apartment in Paris to stay for a week. And the best place that we found to house 7 guys for a good price was on the 6th floor of an apartment building. And we're like, well, why don't we just leave the wheelchair at home? And then we don't have to worry about it at all.
So you really, before that, had thought that it was just the backpack was a part-time thing.
Right.
Oh, I didn't realize this.
Yeah. And so, at some point in there, I would say probably about halfway through the planning process, we said, let's bring on a 4th carrier and scrap the wheelchair. And so that's what we did. So we ended up with 4 carriers and 2 camera guys and myself, because we figured if we're going to do something this absurd, then we need documentation to prove it.
In the moment, did you think it was like that? Absurd? Like, this is a crazy idea we're doing?
Oh, yeah.
Because you guys are saying to each other, we're going to leave the wheelchair. We're just going to carry you, Kevan. Did this whole thing, everything that we're doing. And that was, you hadn't heard or anybody doing that before. Right.
Yeah, I had heard of people using like a modified wheelchair that people could pick up and carry, or heard of, like, there's a father and son that do marathons where the dad pushes the chair, and I'd heard of stuff like that, but I'd never heard of someone going all out, and completely abandoning the conventional accessibility aspect and trying something new. And we really had no idea how it would turn out. I think part of what was on our side was our naivety, maybe, or just that, we'll make it work kind of thing. And it's kind of funny because we ended up making a documentary, and there are parts of the documentary where we get lost, or
that's reality, though, isn't it?
Yeah, bad stuff happens, and it's like, well, we didn't know that would happen, but we're still alive. We made it work, and that's kind of that like late 20s concept. You just run with it and see what happens, and that's your adventure. And so, we decided where we were going. We went to Paris.
Here's what I want to know, because it was all new, this backpacking idea. And you didn't know what you were doing. Like, you're like, we're just going to make it happen.
Yeah.
Were there challenges that came up that you weren't expecting that you had to cross?
Well, I broke my nose. That was a challenge.
Really?
Yeah. We actually, so when we got to Ireland, we had 2 weeks without any incidents, and for the most part, and kind of feeling like we had the routine, we had the groove down, and we rented a car, which was a new thing for us. We rented a car. We set me in the backpack on the bench, and put a seatbelt around it, and figured I'd be secure, until we had to hit the brakes on the highway, and we found that the backpack was not only not secure, but it was top heavy. So I just went flying forward.
Wow.
And face planted into the seat in front of me, and broke my nose and messed up my foot pretty bad. And wow. There was definitely a moment in that we pulled over and got me out and kind of did an inspection. And there was a moment in there when I thought, well, this, it's been a failure. We're going to pack up and go home. And everyone that looked on beforehand and said, this is a bad idea, we're going to get home and they're going to say, see. And
so that was like the back of your head still?
Yeah. It was definitely, well, in that moment, it was at the front of my head and coming out my nose. But it was a moment where I thought I have failed. And that's when I realized, because I also sat there going, I need someone in my corner right now. And that's when I looked around and realized I had 6 guys around me, and they weren't going anywhere. And they didn't think of it as the end of the trip. And also, it wasn't a failure, because whether we stop here and come home or we continue on, what we've shown is that this is possible. Mm-hmm. And what we've shown now that I've hurt myself is that it's not comfortable and it's going to hurt, but it's still possible. And that's the beauty of life, is that sure, things hurt, but they're worth it, you know?
Yeah.
So in that sense, that was a big challenge, but it was also a learning experience, a beautiful moment in that.
And you mentioned earlier too, like there was, I think, 2 other guys that were there filming it, because you guys were shooting, if you're going to do this, you're going to make a documentary out of it.
Yeah.
When you shot it, because sure, it was, nobody's done this before, but what was your goal or purpose into creating this thing? Like, what did you want people to see or hear or learn when you were showing it to them?
Well, our intention in doing the trip as a whole was that we just wanted to go to Europe.
Sure.
there was no deeper meaning.
That's the beauty
originally.
of it, though,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, it was just, it wasn't even a thing of, this is what Kevan wants to do and we're going to help him do it. It was more just, hey, my buddies and I want to do this, and this is how we have to do it. And so kind of the same thing with the documentary is the guy that filmed it, Luke Thompson, is just, he's an old friend of mine, really amazing guy, and we've worked together on some other stuff as well. And so I knew that I wanted to take him because he would understand it. He would get what we were doing. And so he and another guy, Jameson, they just filmed. They had no ulterior motive. They had no agenda in what they were doing. They just filmed what was happening. And they would ask us questions here and there. They'd say, hey, how are you feeling today? Or what are we doing today? Why are you excited about it? They knew that we had an itinerary, but when we got back, Luke started looking through the footage, and he even had an idea of what he would do for the film. And then I gave him the first draft of the book, which was just a memoir. I kept a journal while we were there and building up to it for the year before. And so I just went through that and wrote a full memoir of our experience from start to finish. And I even wrote that without an agenda. I just chronicled everything. And I gave him the first draft, and he read it and pulled out a highlighter and just started marking stuff and said, okay, this is what the documentary looks like. The guy that acted as my editor on my book, he's a brilliant editor, and I just love working with him. But after, I think, the second or third draft of him working on it, we got together for dinner one night, and he said, you realize that point at which you guys had the thing with the car and you broke your nose and everything and had that moment of doubt, that actually fits perfectly with the formula of a story, because it's the beginning of the third act. And that's in the moment when the hero, in a sense, delves into hell and reemerges something new.
Yeah.
And he was like, you couldn't have planned this. This is perfect.
Like, oh, did I?
Yeah. He and Luke, the filmmaker, Luke told me later, he was like, yeah, I mean, we pulled on the cameras and we, because they were asleep in the back when we had to hit the brakes, but the cameras came on very fast. And he told me later, he said, yeah, we got the cameras on and we wanted to make sure you were okay, but honestly, in the back of my mind, I'm going, yes, this is what we need. I was like, all right, cool. So, it was just really amazing to see how, we talk about how life is a story, but it was cool to see how it actually did unfold as a perfect narrative for retelling over and over.
Now, today, We Carry Kevan is an official nonprofit. So you went from this trip with your buddies, and now there's a nonprofit where I know you're out speaking about what you've done and accessibility, and you're showing this film and you're doing different things. And maybe this is a big story, but I'm curious about how you transitioned from taking this trip seeing this story come to life to now you actually have become kind of the spokesperson for creating accessibility in the world differently. How did you go from that to this?
Yeah, it's pretty funny because I'm 32, and for my whole life building up to this point, my sister is in a wheelchair as well, and so we grew up together. But we essentially grew up in an able-bodied community, and I had plans of, I'm a writer. I've worked on podcasts. I've played in bands. I've done all this creative stuff, and everyone's always said, well, why don't you talk about your experience with disabilities? And I've always cringed at that. And I'm like, no, I'm so much more than that, and I can get by on, my creative endeavors, and I can talk about everything else in the world. And so my life has never been kind of wrapped around that identity. And then we decided to do this trip, and all these families and individuals with disabilities started following us on Facebook, started emailing us, and hundreds and hundreds of people just writing and saying, where'd you get these friends? Where'd you get this backpack? How are you pulling this off?
Where'd you get these friends?
Right. Yeah.
Can I get some of these friends?
Yeah. That's a whole other story.
That's brilliant.
Yeah. And most of them, as a side note, actually all of them just came from, playing music and meeting people on the street and just developing relationships over the years. And so, all these people started contacting us and having all these questions. And next thing I knew, I was thinking, well, we need to answer these questions more so than me just emailing them and saying, I don't know, I've got cool friends. That's it.
It felt like a responsibility almost because there were so many of them.
Yeah, completely. And I saw this need and this gap kind of in culture where it was almost like there needed to be this icebreaker between the able-bodied and disabled community. And so I was like, well, it's kind of here. It's in my lap. I might as well see what we can do with it.
What was your hope or the scope for We Carry Kevan nonprofit? What's the goal of that, and how do you activate it maybe?
My goal and my vision is broader than the backpack, because my thing is the backpack worked for me. That doesn't mean it works for everyone, which is kind of the message behind the ADA compliance that we see in the U.S., which is, ramps are great, automatic doors are great, elevators, but with automatic doors, half the time the button is out of reach. So it works for some people, it doesn't work for others. But when you strip it down and you think about true accessibility is when people are helping people, then that's, the world becomes accessible, because then anything's possible. Because then not only do you have machinery or, technology, but you also have bodies, and you have imaginations.
Can you talk more about that? What do you mean about people helping people? What is that?
People helping people in the sense of looking out for one another and physically being involved. Okay. An example, kind of going back to the automatic door concept, is downtown here, there's a lot about automatic doors. Half of them I can't reach. But if I have a buddy with me, and we're just hanging out. He's not with me to help. We're just hanging out. And we're walking somewhere, and he can just open the door,
Yeah.
And so, and then to go to a bigger stage, we'll say, in Ireland, we went on this island and climbed 600 steps to a monastery. Nobody wants an elevator there.
Oh, sure.
That would ruin the whole point, and then the feel of the whole place. And so before this, I think the world would look on and say, well, then that's not accessible. But because I had some friends and an imagination, and for us, a backpack, then we were able to make it work.
It's almost redefining accessibility.
Yeah, completely.
Because like you said, I didn't think about it this way, like the elevator. Yeah, nobody wants that there in this old, stone.
Right. Like they have a helicopter pad, and that's almost too much,
Yeah, right.
You need that for emergencies, but
Yeah.
it's tucked away in the back, But yeah, and so for me, the backpack worked, but we really see it as a bigger conversation.
Okay.
And so that's the bigger picture. Our mission statement says that believing in the inherent value of every person, we are striving to redefine accessibility as a cooperative effort. And
I like that.
Yeah, just people being involved.
Yeah.
And what that means is that you have the disabled and the able-bodied both need to be addressed in that situation. And so that's what we're working towards. But all of that is conceptual. All of that's just a mindset and a heart set. Mm-hmm. So we needed a physical aspect. We needed a tangible thing for people to see and touch and acquire even. And since everyone was asking about the backpack, that's kind of where it started. Then we said, well, let's develop a backpack because it will work for a lot of people. And I think a lot of our demographic is families with kids that have cerebral palsy or SMA like I have, and Duchenne's and stuff like that. And so their kids are, maybe 8 or 10 years old, mm-hmm. and they're old enough that they want to go out and have experiences with their families, but they're too big for a toddler carrier. And so we can work with them on developing something, and it may only work for them for a couple of years, or depending on their disease or situation, it may work forever. It may be the right size for them.
But even a couple of years, that's still 2 more years than they had before.
Oh, yeah.
Of having accessibility in a new way.
Yeah, and such a rich experience. I mean, I had an experience a few months ago. I went out to Colorado and worked with a family on developing a backpack for their son. Their son is, I want to say he's 11. And, the dad works. He's a truck driver, so he's out a lot. And the mom takes care of the kids mostly. And when he's home, he helps out when he can. But there's definitely an identity there where the dad wants to be involved and wants to provide. And so we get this backpack done. And the mom says, well, you're going to carry him. You're bigger than me. You're stronger. And he said, all right. He was this big brick of a guy, just big guy, like a wall. And we went out to the park, and he put his son on his back, and they walked off on their own. And it was this father-son moment that they have never had, for years. And so to be able to provide something like that, even if it's just for a year or a couple of years, it's a powerful and a rich experience for that family, and for that son and for that dad. So.
You're just about to repeat what you just did in Europe, and now you're going to do it in China, and that's just in a couple months, I think.
It is, and it's terrifying.
Well, here's the thing I want to know, because I know it's a little bit different. I've done a little research on why you're doing China. Mm-hmm. But you are doing China differently. There's real intent there other than just like, let's go hang out, buddies. So what's the intent about doing a backpacking trip in China?
So we actually came up with the idea near the end of our time in Europe. And, we're running into all sorts of people and standing in, metro stations and people staring at you. And we realized that, and this kind of goes back to seeing the backpack as a tool in the bigger picture, which is we realized that people can see what we're doing from across the room or across the street, and we don't have to explain it. Like it's a story. It's a visual story, and people get it.
Yeah, I didn't think about it, but you're right.
I mean, you're not going to see that anywhere else, and so it may take a minute. And it's kind of funny to watch people, on a train. They're at the other end of the car, and you see them kind of furrow the brow and look at you, and then start smiling, and you're like, yeah, you get it. And they may not know the details, but what they know is this guy can't do something, and his friends are making it happen. and just the spirit of it. I mean, as I said earlier, it was just guys being together, and I think that is seen as well. That it's not like, oh, these guys are serving this person. It's these guys are friends, and this is how they do life. And so we realized that was going on, and we said, well, what if we went somewhere with that intent of essentially allowing ourselves to be a spectacle? And we settled on China. One of the guys, who's actually my roommate now, he had gone to China with his brother to adopt a child with Down syndrome, and they had just seen and experienced firsthand that disabilities are handled differently there, and they're it's just not as prevalent, and so people don't really know what to do with it. And so our hope originally was, well, let's go to China and just be present. Let's walk around. Let's see some sights, explore. But really underneath what we're doing is being a spectacle to spark a question in people's minds. And if conversations come from it, great. If not, we'll just hope that people saw and people started thinking and kind of trust things to go from there.
If you've been doing things on your own for a while, plus it's stuff that you're really passionate about or love, has it been difficult to kind of shift gears a little bit to say, well, it's not just I and Kevan, right? I need to let others be part of this movement and let them take things on or delegate. Has that been an easy adjustment or difficult?
It's not difficult for me to wrap my head around. It's not difficult for me to want to do. It's always been a team effort in my life. I've never really done a lot literally on my own, and so that part's been easy to say, yeah, I've got this board. This person can do this, and bam, 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 and yet it has been a little difficult for, I guess you could say, the public arena to wrap their head around that. My sister she's an amazing genius who teaches English as a second language and writes curriculums and all this stuff. And early on, as I was getting frustrated with this and saying, why is it all about me? This is so frustrating. And she said, the statement, "We carry Kevan," Kevan is not the subject. We is, because we is doing the carrying. And so she was like, you're really not a big part of this in the end. It's about
Your sister's
everyone.
Awesome.
Yeah, she is. Really trying to bring in the guys and the board and show the world that, that the whole point is that I can't do this. I can't go to Europe on my own. I don't even have the courage to go. And something I've been telling people lately is, people say, wow, you're so brave. And I say, well, I only have enough courage, or I only need enough courage for about 5 seconds to say, okay. And then I'm literally on their back. What am I going to do about it? And so we went out into the ocean a few months ago. We were in LA, and my friend Tom said, as your friend and your carrier, I think it's my responsibility to take you out there. So we walked out about knee deep, and he said, you doing all right? And I had enough courage to say, yeah, I'm good. And he said, all right, I'm going to take that as we should go further. And next thing I knew, we were waist deep, and he was like, you okay? Yeah, I'm all right. So that's all I needed, because they're the ones propelling us forward.
It's been so good to be here in Fort Wayne with you.
Yeah, it's been a joy.
Thanks.
Yeah.
You can learn more about Kevan and his work with We Carry Kevan at wecarrykevan.com. You'll also find a link to learn about how you can support him and his friends for their upcoming trip to China. But this adventure isn't quite done yet. Before I headed home to California, I had one more stop to make. I found myself walking in the Pride Parade in Indianapolis. So from Fort Wayne, I drove to Indianapolis for a quick visit with friends. These are the same friends I mentioned in episode 6 of this season. Okay, long story short, because this trip was postponed by a week because I had some garish eye infection, I was visiting in the middle of Indy Pride and my friends were participating. So they said, you should join us in the parade. I thought, okay, sure, why not? So I was happy to support them and honor our community. So here's what happened when I said yes. I actually gained a new perspective of the LGBTIA community outside of my regular viewpoints in San Francisco and LA. So it was a smaller function for sure, but the love and support was really tangible there. And it reminded me that's especially what we need in smaller communities. With Pride, we acknowledge our existence and we stand up for our rights and against discrimination. So, since I said yes, my trip to interview Kevan turned into an all-new double adventure. So, make sure you're saying yes to unexpected adventures too. Now back to my time with Kevan. You can see pictures of Kevan and I over on the episode webpage. You may even find a picture of me wearing my new Fortezza Carry Kevan shirt that I bought while I was there. Head over to mybigstory.show to find it as well as other episodes. If you want to get deeper into my adventures and what else I'm up to, you should join me on the socials. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook as Oh Hi Christopher. That's O-O-H Hi Christopher. For more inspiration and resources to celebrate our differences and to change the world, you should sign up to the Be Inspired newsletter at christopherswan.info, and you'll get the latest insights, resources, and inspiration delivered straight to that inbox. If it's important for you to have others hear these kind of stories and ideas, then you should share this show with your people in your favorite social community. Also, giving the show a rating and writing a review for it in iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts will also spread the word. The production for this episode is from the creative minds over at Podcast Monster. And well, that's the end of this adventure. I'm Christopher Swan, and this is my big story.